A very good morning to you. You're watching Sky News Breakfast, and I'm pleased to say with us this morning to review the papers, the Chief Executive of International Marketing Partners. It's Alison Stewart-Allen, and journalist and author Janelle Aldridge. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining me. I have to say this is a real treat for me, because I never get a chance to go through the papers uninterrupted by my children, so thank you. Thank you, Sky News. Shall we start with the Mirror, because this is quite a bit of staggering reporting from the Daily Mirror, the Sunday Mirror here, and their headline, staggering £100 billion of Tory waste. Janelle.
Yeah, so what they're saying is that since Rishi Sunak was either Chancellor or just before he was Chancellor and then Prime Minister, there's been this waste, which is an average of 25 billion every year. So we're talking about a sum that's almost 100 times what it would be to raise a junior doctor's wages, at nearly £1,500 for every adult and child in the UK. And they're talking about things like 1.7 million spent painting the Prime Minister's planes, 3 billion on hiring temps to do civil service jobs, and all of this coming ahead of the autumn statement where Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, is expected to slash benefits. So I think it's coming at a really awkward juxtaposition. You know, we all know that COVID was the unseen, almost unplanned for, couldn't plan for it, it was just happening in real time. So yeah, some of that would have been chaotic in terms of spending. There's talk about PPE that wasn't used or was unusable. However, I do really think that we've come through a real time of austerity. So many people are struggling with their bills, really chasing the pennies. So this waste seems in direct contradiction to what most of us are experiencing. You know, we're told stop buying avocado on toast, you know, stop doing all of this if you want to save a few quid. But it seems like that saving mindset doesn't seem to apply to this, but it's applied to us. And I think that's what most people reading this who feel strongly about this are going to say, well, hang on, why don't you do the kind of austerity that you're putting us all through?
Yeah, Alison, anyone picking up the Sunday Mirror, it won't go down well, will it?
No, it won't go down well. And in fact, related in some ways in a lot of the other papers are stories too about, you know, tax cuts and inheritance tax cuts. So it's not looking very coherent as a strategy.
No, and that's really interesting because you have picked, Alison, in the Observer, this is page one, it's all focusing on those potential inheritance tax cuts.
Yes.
Is Jeremy Hunt trying to woo back those Conservatives that perhaps were a little bit concerned about where the party was going?
Well, I think he has a potentially a £40 billion windfall.
Okay.
Based on the fact that the tax receipts are higher than they expected. And so if you have more money than you thought you had, you're in a position potentially to decide what to do with it. And on Wednesday, he's due to announce his plan, one of which is rumored to be a tax cut, an income tax cut, removing the thresholds or raising or lowering the thresholds and unfreezing them so people have a lower tax bill, and or inheritance tax cuts as well. The challenge for the business leaders who are watching today and who are reading these stories is how this will affect their staff. Because in 2024, as you're planning your pay rises, you're looking at salaries, you're doing end-of-year reviews right now, and people will want to know, how much am I taking home? Am I going to take home more or
how
not?
Much you're left at the end of the month.
Yes.
To spend.
Yes, absolutely.
If it's very little, that's going to affect who you vote for in the general election. And then we were hearing, weren't we, from Amanda Akat, our political correspondent, that speculation in the 11th hour that potentially tax cuts that would benefit lower income workers, that's going to kind of really blow up, isn't it? If true.
Well, I think the question really is, who do they think is their core base? Because this first move suggests that they're trying to win back, as you said, their former core base, who may think, okay, they're not really as fiscally sound as we would like to see. But this move, okay, well, maybe they are going to go for the red wall. But in a world where maybe you can't have everything, who do they think is not the more important group, but the priority group that they need to win over the most? But I hope decisions aren't made like that. You want decisions to be made on the right thing to do in the best
of the country.
Yeah,
we shall see.
Yeah.
We'll be, of course, covering the autumn statement on Wednesday. Sophie Ridge will be in the hot seat guiding viewers through that. Let's move on, Janelle, because in the Telegraph, it's really focusing on a story that we covered on Wednesday, that decision from the Supreme Court that Rwanda was voted as illegal, that migrants can't be sent there. So here we are then, another potential plan from the Conservative Party that they may station officials out in Rwanda. Talk to me a bit more about this, because this is their way, I suppose, of trying to make it a workable plan.
I mean, when you're down in a pit, there comes a point when you have to say, when do we stop digging? Because actually we can't see above the top of the pit. And I would wonder if we're at that point now. I mean, it seems really interesting to me that they're so set on Rwanda as the solution.
It's one of those 5 pledges, isn't it?
One of the 5 about the small
Rishi
boats.
Sunak, yeah.
But it seems like, why is Rwanda the only choice that we think could be the way to solve it, or why is it the number 1 choice when it's proving so problematic? What are the other ideas? Are there other ideas? So that's the one thing. We have to have more than one big idea to solve this problem. Also, now people are talking about no confidence letters in Mr. Sunak going to the
I mean, how much is that growing, really?
I mean, it would be an absolute gift to Labour on a platter if they were to get rid of another Prime Minister and we get another unelected one parachuted in. I mean, nobody wins if that's the solution. But it seems like with Rwanda, they seem to have all their eggs in this basket, so there seems to be no length they won't go to try and make it workable. And I understand that in the past year, that since they took the decision to the Supreme Court, things might have changed in Rwanda, they might have moved things on. But how much more money are we going to spend thinking about this 100 billion waste? How much more money are we going to spend after an idea that seems unworkable?
Yeah, well, then you have, Alison, the opposition saying, hang on a second, shouldn't we be looking at the processing of applications as opposed to that Rwanda plan?
Yes, and actually, the reason to look at the processing of applications is also because post-Brexit, the UK needs all the brain power it can get. And these applicants, in many cases, are very talented, highly educated people, believe it or not. Even though, supposedly there's a lot of rhetoric about the fact that they're not skilled and they just want to come to the UK for the benefits. Actually, there are also a lot of people fleeing incredibly worrying political situations at home, and they're highly educated people. So being a little more perhaps methodical and scrutinizing these through the lens of, here's some talent. These businesses in this country can really use these smart people.
Well, that's one way to look at it. Maybe a sensible way. Who knows? Should we stay with the Telegraph, actually, Alison, because I love this story. Talk to me about civil servants potentially working remotely overseas, because it was a big thing, wasn't it, during the pandemic, that you could work from home, and there were people, fleeing central London, moving down to Devon and idyllic places. But what's happening here?
Yeah, well, this story is saying that civil servants have now been given the green light to work remotely overseas.
Right.
And they can now work remotely overseas for up to 2 weeks a year, which actually, compared to private sector companies, that's actually not very much.
Oh, really?
Because several companies now say you can work from anywhere. If the work's getting done, provided you're not overseas for more than 90 days, because that has a tax implication, who cares? If the work's getting done, the work's getting done. Whereas this is suggesting that ministers are very worried that the civil servants won't be in the office, and that will undermine productivity and face-to-face collaboration. Companies have been dealing with this since COVID very successfully, having staff working remotely for more than, 3-4 days a week, maybe 5 days a week. So perhaps the civil service should look at what's happening in companies and look at best practices there, and seeing that isn't hurting productivity. You don't necessarily need to always be in the office to get the work done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with that, but the government are saying, you're not allowed to work remotely overseas unless it's exceptional
Yes.
circumstances. I'm still trying to figure out how I can do this shift. I'm not sure it's going to work.
Bring back
The other story that you picked out in the Times, this is page 1, Janelle. This is an interesting story, isn't it? Because it's about brain injuries for rugby players. I've covered that story many years, in particular for children, actually, that take part in the game. But this is quite a worry, isn't it?
So yeah, there's 300 former players taking the governing body to court. They say they've been left with illnesses including dementia, depression, and because of repeated blows to the head on the field. And so they're bringing the case against World Rugby, the Rugby Football Union in England, and the Welsh Rugby Union.
Okay.
And some people are saying, you know, they really have life-impacting injuries from playing this game on the field. And I think it will be interesting to see if this case if they do win, what this does for impacting other sports, because it's not just rugby where there's, you know, it's also football where there's concerns about heading the ball. So what will happen in sport going forward? But I think if this is something that needs to change, it will be, I'm not going to say good if it wins, but if it wins, at least it will highlight something that can potentially prevent children from going into this scenario in the next few years where we have a bigger and bigger problem. Actually, if things like this are happening, it's good to nip it in the bud and to try and get to a state where we play these things safely.
No, I think that's a really important milestone case, particularly, as you say, for children. Alison, dare we talk about this next story? It's really, really horrific.
It is.
In the People.
Yes. So a woman has spent the last 5 years, Kelly Ormerod, trying to find out and, you know, settle, if you like, the case of losing her parents to carbon monoxide poisoning while they were on holiday in Egypt. So Kelly, her young daughter, and her parents all went on holiday. The parents slept through a very toxic, noxious gas in their room and lost their lives. And according to the inquest, finally she pushed for it and finally got an inquest. The conclusion is that the pesticide that was used to kill bed bugs reacted with the other, maybe heating or ventilation system, and caused carbon monoxide poisoning. I think the bottom line is, using a pesticide like a regular over-the-counter pesticide rather than a professional service to remove bed bugs is really what gave rise to this situation and their deaths. So the lesson here now, not just in Egypt, but, you know, bed bugs seem to be now a big story, especially in the run-up to the Olympic Games in Paris in the summer, this coming summer. You know, this is something to pay attention to. If you have bed bugs and you want to remove them, have it done professionally. Don't use an over-the-counter pesticide.
Absolutely.
Obviously, it kills people.
Yeah, a real fight for justice there for a family in grieving. Alison, Janelle, thank you so much for your time. We'll get you back in the next hour. Look forward to it.